lot.
So you guys solved the problem, right? How we can prevent this.
Solve the problem
right?
in the world.
Psychology.
Reduce it, eliminate it. Okay, we're going to talk about what's available to, I do have that in here, but I really wanted to get your thoughts about this. And we'll see, what's out there. And definitely, as we know with other resources, in some areas there's a whole lot, other areas they're, nil. Okay, so that's part of the problem too. So why don't we just kind of go around the room? I know you sort of broke off, into groups, some of you, and why don't we start with you, Diana, and you guys could tell me what were some of your thoughts with as far as prevention of child abuse.
I think we said that I think the first thing that it needs to be done is when the child has sex education at school, they should touch on child abuse. So to start off there, because then you can prevent a lot of things when they're young, once they get older, and have a refresher course every year.
Okay, so you're thinking like in grade school, when they start school, like the elementary school years.
And then if there's, if it's not a child, but when the mother finds out that she's pregnant, have available resources where they say parenting classes, the RFOD. There's a lot of places they charge to have those classes to provide
It's required.
and it's a requirement. And also have transportation for people. And have maybe a website where parents can log in and somebody that is online 24 hours a week and have something and get an answer for 800 number. And a follow-up visit with a social worker after the fact when the baby's born, and to go into the home and
Those are all great ideas. Some of which are implemented, and some not, or
not really.
yeah, not full, not across the board.
I think the other thing is how drugs and alcohol can affect the child before they're even born. Because some of these things you put up there, okay, what came first? The prenatal exposure, that caused a child maybe to have some physiological problems if they can't control emotions, if they in addition to the abuse. I mean, it's almost like let's do that before the child's even born. But in a perfect world, we'd have all this money to do all
Right,
of this.
right. But we do a number of other types of screening in their spending for, so something, and especially when you think of the significance of this and all the costs, everything that we talked about, you think that logically would make sense. Can we impose those types of screenings, or is there an issue of, is there a violation of that? But you're right, so much drug abuse is kind of intertwined with all of the different types of abuse, and so we do know that prenatally, it can definitely impact the child's development before birth and on later on in life. So, yeah, and that's the problem with some of this research. It's difficult to. It gets a little convoluted and able to extract, what piece may have been part of that, could be an element of that, or is it just an element of the abusive environment, or all of it? Yeah, it's a good point. Yes. Okay, anything else? Yes, that's good. Okay.
We had a big list.
Good, that's good.
We kind of covered hospital setting and school settings for like all age groups, I think. We talked about support groups for parents, but categorizing them really for young mothers or for single fathers or for single mothers based on what their needs are. We talked about birth to 3 classes in hospitals, aiding new mothers and fathers, prenatal classes, providing resources about colicky babies, the stages of maybe grief of when you get your child, when you give birth to your child and you didn't expect what has come, like a disability or malformation or anything like that, and do some psychoeducation about the type of parenting that they might choose to be like, and bring that awareness into fruition.
Oh, hello, Jay. Yeah. Very good. Those all sound like great ideas. Some of which, as we're going to touch on, have been implemented, but not as comprehensive, really, as you're mentioning.
We have more.
No, go on. If you have more, that's terrific. Great.
We talked about policy safeguard checklists for nurses and doctors and working with the social worker, having before and after classes, especially courses for attachment and bonding. One stage for the first few years, and then the other stage for moms and dads who might have been incarcerated or who had sexual abuse before or child abuse before, who are drug addicted, and we know that they were drug addicted. So, giving resources to those families specific for their needs.
Yeah, I think that's excellent because there's so much generational stuff that you see that's passed on, particularly with early attachment.
Yeah, and I think that we also talked about the fact that sometimes children don't know what is abusive, what is okay and not okay, and having children targeted programs for that population would be helpful, because sometimes people don't know what's teasing and what's bullying that become later on abusive, and that creates a lot of psychological impairment later on, especially if there are differences in the child.
Yes.
Maybe obesity or something like that.
No, it's
any
it
other
is
issues.
huge. I mean, you'll hear people talk about very early, vivid, experiences that they had where they were bullied and how it's impacted their thinking about themselves, for the rest of their lives.
Yeah. So we also talked about in schools having interactive social activities that promote pro-social behavior versus abusive behaviors, to kind of really capitalize on identifying what that abuse looks like, and it could probably relate to what they see at home or in their environment.
And that's so important because oftentimes there may be certain activities, but particularly the children that you want to reach to are not getting involved in this. Where others are that typically do, right? But then the others that you really want to. So there's more effort that's being put into that, creating groups that are involving the kids that don't typically interact, and then focusing on more of the pro-social stuff. So that's great. We definitely need to do more though.
Well, yeah, we also talked about relationship dangers and stranger dangers. I know that they do have programs for that. But I think, as what you were talking about before, as far as relationships, abuse within the family, sometimes it gets clouded as far as what type of relationships are appropriate between a grandfather and their child, or an uncle, or it's always a man, but maybe also a mother towards their daughter, or what can be tolerated. Because I think I've personally had experiences with other children not knowing what's the boundaries, and not knowing if the child wants to make a report about the mother, and it's not in this setting, but it's in other settings where they don't know what to do at that point, where they need to, but they just need more support in understanding what is tolerable and not tolerable.
And it's interesting you mention that, because there is a lot of research regarding what happens often to the individual who is the one that was the victim in that case, but how they are looked upon sometimes by family members, or actually blamed in part and that sort of thing. So things that maybe never really get resolved within the family dynamic have slipped upon.
And just carried over through generations,
Yeah.
being that it's accepted.
But that would be one mode of trying to intervene and involve the entire family too. These are all great. Is there more?
Yeah.
Mention some more. Yeah.
Everything.
Pre-screenings we talked about for disability awareness, but I think more of an extensive pre-screening for disability awareness. I think they do have that in place in hospitals, but when you talked about guilt and shame came up, addressing those psychological factors with the mother and or father is going to be very helpful in knowing what kind of parents that they want to be, or understanding where their upbringing is and maybe where they want to possibly change. So a lot of psychoeducation that we had talked about. Was there other things?
That was the only last thing. Making sure that there's no guilt and shame, so they don't isolate themselves and not and think that it's just them. So there's a parent support group that it's not just you. You're having your baby's colicky. You're having trouble. You're not bonding. Don't be ashamed and isolate yourself.
Right. And I think that's why, in large part, some of these webcasts that we're seeing, these parents need help. They really do need help, and maybe that's one way that they're attempting to get it. So that's been mentioned, albeit it's pretty evident that for the most part it's abusive, but largely maybe kind of a cry for help, that they're overwhelmed and don't know what to do and what else to do. So. But yes, I think trying to not normalize it, but make it that there are other people that are under a great deal of stress, and as a result, and a lot of it has to do with the multiple stressors that families have upon them. So, and then they're coping and able to deal with it. Some unable to deal with it. So, abuse. But you got. Wow, this is great. If you ever get any grants our way, to come over to this group for ideas. A lot of good ideas. Okay. Did you exhaust your list, or did you?
No, it's okay.
Okay.
We had domestic violence shelter in there, child abuse hotline, 911, emergency plans, and stuff like that.
Oh, that's great. And you guys, it sounds like you're familiar enough with the different risk factors that you're trying to cover all of those. Okay, great.